Good morning, everyone. We're continuing here in the words of the CHOFETZ CHAIM, and at the end of that little piece, there's what's called a Haggadah. There's added words that the CHOFETZ CHAIM says like this. Now, let's say that Ruvain, who's the one that's revealing these words, these denigrating words about Shimon, in front of three people, he he tells everybody, listen, I'm going to tell you what I have to say about Shimon right now, but please do not reveal this to anybody else. It's possible, says the CHOFETZ CHAIM, that perhaps the person who's listening, we'll call him Levi, would be permitted to disclose this negative information casually to another person, as long as he's not going to Shimon, the one that the Lashon Hara was spoken about. Even though that in general, whenever we speak about Lashon Hara, it applies a feeling like nishma me'amisaper shum azhar alzeh, even if the one who's telling over the Lashon Hara never gave a warning in where he said, please do not repeat these words of Lashon Hara. And then you would think, oh, well, if he repeats it, that's Lashon Hara. But if he doesn't, but if the Mesaper, if the one telling over Lashon Hara never gave a warning, maybe I could get away with it. It's not true. By a regular case of Lashon Hara, if Ruvain is telling Shimon Lashon Hara about a third person, so Shimon is never allowed to go and repeat the words of Lashon Hara. Says the CHOFETZ CHAIM, Hainu b'Mesaper shelo b'apitlasa. That prohibition of Lashon Hara is really only talking about where he's not telling over the Lashon Hara to begin with in front of three people. But when it comes to our case over here, where again Ruvain was telling over the Lashon Hara about Shimon in front of three people to begin with, if Ruvain does not warn the people that are listening that they should not repeat the information, so therefore, this is something then that is going to be revealed in the future. He knows that. Ruvain knows that when he's telling over this information, it's very likely that people are going to speak. And therefore, if one of these three people goes and speaks Lashon Hara, that's not a Lashon Hara that the Torah ever said is going to be us, is going to be prohibited. As long as the person listening, that we're calling Levi, when he was repeating the information to somebody else, he was not intending to spread the word of Lashon Hara. He just wanted to give over this information to somebody else. However, V'tzarech iyun, says the CHOFETZ CHAIM, this requires more understanding to know exactly what you're allowed to do. So he brings down in the notes over here that this halacha really requires further analysis, because we're not sure how to interpret Ruvain's warning not to tell Shimon. Remember, Ruvain just said, don't tell Shimon. We don't want him to know what he was, we don't want him to know what he's saying. So that's the case. The case is that Ruvain is telling three people about this degrading information about Shimon, and Ruvain says, whatever you do, don't tell Shimon. So if he said, don't tell Shimon, that means he holds, you can't tell Shimon, but maybe he says you can go and tell other people. So now, if Levi wants to go and tell other people, so maybe it would be permitted, because that's not really the prohibition of Lashon Hara. So says the CHOFETZ CHAIM, on one hand, Ruvain really only minds if Shimon is told directly about the words of Lashon Hara that he spoke. But since that Ruvain knows that if he tells it in front of three people are going to talk, and maybe Shimon's going to find out, so then maybe he doesn't really care if Shimon hears incidentally from other people. On the other hand, we could tell you that maybe Ruvain doesn't want the matter to be repeated to anyone, because maybe Shimon's going to hear it, even if it's indirectly. He'll hear the negative information, he'll know that it came from Ruvain or from somebody else, and therefore it's going to end up hurting Shimon. That will end up being Mamish Lashon Hara. So therefore, says the CHOFETZ CHAIM, it's really not clear. And once again, we find ourselves stuck in a place where on one hand the halacha would seem to dictate that you could say the words, on the other hand it would seem to be pretty clear that you cannot say the words. So again, we find ourselves in a quandary where we say, when in doubt, do without, don't say over words of Lashon Hara in front of 3 people, because even with a warning, you never know whether it's going to reach the person that you're speaking about or not. Have a wonderful day.